These ones are overage. August decided that he should get the names of the two other girls straight. However, he couldn't think of a way to pose the question without sounding awkward. He had heard their names from Ruby, Denise Lily and Jocelyn. He didn't know how to figure out which belonged to whom, either. Did the sword-wielding girl, with the fiery red hair and pretty mouth, look like a Denise, or a Jessel? Did the last name Lynn indicate a certain race? If so, August couldn't tell. They both looked similar in every way, except for the sword girl's fiery red hair. The one with the red hair and sword is Denise, and the one with the blue hair and staff is Jessel. Elise had noticed his confusion, and answered the question for him. Blue hair? August felt confused for a moment, but then noticed it, a slight sheen in the hair of Jessel that, when seen in the right light, appeared blue. In any case, August thought, how did you know? Nah, I just know, said Elise, smiling smugly. The heart-to-heart in the middle of the room between the four girls wound down about then. Penny turned from the huddle. You've been talking to each other, haven't you? She sounded inquisitive, and a little defensive. Something about her new dress had perked her up. Is it something about us? As a matter of fact, it is, answered Elise, who was quick on the draw. We were discussing your rankings, and I cleared up a little confusion August had about Denise and Jessel's names. Hey! August thought. Why did you tell them? You were the one that mixed them up, Elise said, nudging him with her consciousness. It was eerily similar to how it would feel if it had happened in real life. The least you can do is own up to it. It's not my fault that I don't know magical girls, or whatever, and that I'm not a genius that knows everything, August replied. Elise smiled at that. You do have a point. You're doing it again, said Penny, who crossed her arms with a pout on her face. Let me in on it too. August was reminded that Penny was still 9 years of age. Even though she looked the same age as the officers that had barged into their room. If what Ruby had said was correct, then the officers had been living for quite some time. Ruby had mentioned serving for 270 years, so she must have been at least 280. It made August feel a little weak inside. August wants to know how old you all are, Elise asked, chuckling good-naturedly. No, wait, August said, but he was cut off by Ruby. I'm 281. She seemed not at all put off about the question. Perhaps it was because of her immortal pre-adolescent appearance. I'm 176, added Jessel. Her blue hair shone a little more when she said it, as if it had absorbed all those years and was pound of it. I'm 53, Denise followed, looking a little embarrassed. It was true, though, that at less than a fifth of the age of her superior, Ruby, she would feel a little small, August imagined. A charming voice called everyone's attention, from the windowsill. All heads turned at once, to see Coco, the flying rabbit, perched like an inquisitive pigeon. I knew you could do it, Sharp, he said, looking at Penny. You've done a marvelous job, to be expected of one with your presence. He then addressed Ruby in a different tone, without waiting for an answer. Ruby, take your girls and report to General Stiche, immediately. Ruby seemed to know that it was coming, but flinched anyways. She gave one last complicated glance, and turned to the door. Denise and Jessel followed her without comment. Soon the sound of footsteps receded into the distance. The door still leaned against the far wall, the bed beneath it hanging outside through a jagged hole. Scuff marks covered the floor, and most of the sheets sported singe marks from all the lighting up that had been going on. Penny sat down on the floor, her little frame trembling, her uniform drooping over her shoulders. She had had a rough time, August knew, so he decided to do something about it. He nudged Elise with his mind. Elise listened to his idea and smiled. August got down on the floor next to Penny, and put his arm around her. He pulled her close against his side, her small frame fitting snug under his arm. Penny didn't protest, but instead buried her head in August's chest. I'm sorry, August said. He made sure to communicate as much as possible his care for her situation, in those words. "It's okay," Penny said, her voice muffled by August's shirt. "I'll be fine." August gently pushed Penny away, enough so that he could look her in the eyes. They were swollen, tears streaked down her cheeks. "I have a proposition," he said. Penny looked up at him as if he had spoken a different language. "Propos." "It means idea for you," Elise explained for August, her tone slightly sarcastic. "Nice job," she thought to August. "I know you're just trying to help," August replied, grateful despite her attitude. It covered up something inside of her, August saw, but he didn't press it. "Thanks," thought Elise, a little chastised. August continued with his proposition. "I know you're having a hard time," he said, "and I want to help you." Penny nodded, still looking into August's eyes. "And so I have a question," August said. "How about you let us travel with you, for a little while, wherever it is that you're going? If it means helping you, then Elise and I have agreed to go wherever you do." Penny's eyes watered. "You'd really do that for me, Uncle August?" She pressed against his arms, leaning in to emphasize her seriousness. "We'd both do it for you," August told her, "and just call me August." Penny seemed embarrassed as she thought about it. "You promise? To help me?" Her larger-than-life eyes shone with an otherworldly glow that wanted to bind August to his word. August knew that anything he said would have to be carried out, all the way. "I promise," August answered. "As do I," said Elise, still safe in her perch on the bed. Penny pushed her arm out towards August, her fist closed except for the pinky, which stuck out straight up. "Pinky promise?" she said, in all seriousness. Her newfound tone of command was returning. August inhaled sharply. Something magical shone in the air, and Elise got down from her bed to sit next to August. "Pinky promise," August said, as he locked his pinky with hers. Penny held out her other fist to Elise. Elise looked at it for a moment, and then looked at August. "I'm stuck with you," she thought to him. "So why not?" she said out loud, "Pinky promise." She locked pinkies with Penny. A spark ran through their interlocked arms, emanating from somewhere deep inside Penny. When it had disappeared, she let out a satisfied sigh, as if a giant weight had been taken off of her. "Thank you, Elise," she said, taking her arms in both hands. Elise reddened, ever so visible through her moon-white skin, like a blood rose tattooed on her cheek. Her rose-colored eyes fought back tears. "No problem," she said. "I do this all the time." From the windowsill, Coco stirred. "A most beneficial arrangement, private," he said. All three in the room were surprised to see him still there. They turned to face him. "Your next mission is to report to General Stiche, at exactly 0500 spherical time." Coco anticipated their next question. "In order to assist you inside the capital time zone, I will now be obliged to provide you with the reward for your first mission." The air in front of Penny shimmered, and then something slipped out of a pocket in space, a golden pocket watch, ever so intricately carved and tooled, about the size of an apple around. Countless gears spun about in absolute silence inside its beautiful curved shell. 3 dials rested upon those countless gears, 2 gauges, that counted some unknown force, and 1 clock. Its hour hand pointed to 3, and its minute hand pointed to 48. "That's 12 minutes!" Penny exclaimed. "We don't even know where it is." "That is not a problem," Coco answered. "The Chancellor has many functions." With that cryptic remark, he hopped from the windowsill and left into the sky beneath the dome. "The Chancellor." Penny examined her pocket watch closer. August did so as well, leaning over her to see it in her hands. "There's a button, right there," he said, and pointed to a spot on the edge of a shell, where a small cylinder stuck out. "Try pressing it." Penny pressed it. An arrow, made of light, materialized in front of the face. It fit nicely around the Chancellor's engravings. "Wow," Elise said, her voice full of admiration. A magical compass. August and Penny gave blank stares. It's an automatic fortune-telling machine, Elise explained. A colleague of mine, well, he was a colleague, devised the mathematical spell to extract temporal data from the threads of fate and embed them in. Elise stopped when she saw August give her a look. And you scolded me for saying proposition, he thought. Elise reddened. August felt her try to staunch her curiosity. I do want to hear about it another time, he said, genuinely interested. Elise's mood brightened. But you'll have to translate for me. I can do that, Elise said. Penny started from what looked to be deep thought. So it points where I need to go? She said, more of a deduction than a question. Elise and August exchanged glances. Yes, that's exactly what it does, Elise said. I'm not stupid, you know. Penny crossed her arms. And I think we only have 11 more minutes to go where this watch tells us to go. You're right, August said, but who's going to clean up after us? They all looked around the room. The bed through the wall was a particularly devastating touch. As if in response to their question, a large sum of money slipped out of space, and into Penny's palm. This is for the room, a note attached to it read. Coco, it was signed. August put the money on the bed that had punctured the wall. Then, they all picked up their belongings, and headed out the empty door frame. Their journey through the capital was a frantic one, with much racing and dodging and being sworn at by machine pilots and beast drivers alike. Penny led the way, holding out the pocket watch in front of her like a compass. Whenever they reached a street they needed to turn on, the compass snapped in its direction. In this manner they finally arrived at an empty lot in the warehouse district, where no one but the lizards in the streets took notice of them. Penny looked at the compass, and then at the field of tall grass. It says we should go here, she said. She moved the compass about, trying to see if it would change. It didn't. August and Elise stepped forwards first. Penny followed, a little frightened despite her newfound confidence. When the three reached the center of the lot, the compass froze in place, and then jerked the watch in Penny's hands until the arrow pointed straight into the ground. Underground? Elise said, the first to understand. Before anyone could respond, the earth opened up and swallowed them whole. Down a cold metal slide they flew, arms flailing for support as welded ridges jumped past. Penny grabbed hold of August, and August grabbed hold of Elise, so that the three fell together, and tangled together like a human snowball. Surprisingly, no one screamed. Instead, Elise let out a burst of glorious laughter, and then Penny began to scream with delight, soon followed by whoops and calls from August. Together they made quite the crazed trio, sliding down into darkness. Just before they hit the ground, a magical force brought them to a halt like a bed of soft butter. They landed on the floor as one, collapsing into a heap of heavy breathing. No one moved for a moment. A shadow fell over them, cast by magical white lights hidden in the ceiling. August looked up, to see a magical girl of about Penny's height looking down at them. She had on a black and orange dress, and possessed pretty enough features. Her stature resembled that of a statue, straight as a board. General Stiche requests your immediate attendance, Private Sharp, she said, without commenting about their state on the floor. She waited for a moment, while the three adventurers got to their feet. If you would follow me, please. She turned on her heels and walked down the hall, her boots clicking on the stone floor. August, Penny, and Elise followed right after her. The hall they passed though grew wider, until it merged with a sort of underground boulevard, that bustled with commerce like Main Street in the capital. Only, every last person was of approximately Penny's height, and looked between the ages of 7 and 11. Those were the only two major similarities that August could see, though, it was as if a costume ball had been mixed with a military showcase during a children's festival. From his vantage point 1.5 feet above the crowd, August could see an entire spectrum made completely of magical girls, girls with long hair, girls with short hair, girls with hair every color, girls with big swords and short swords, blades and najados and shurikens, staffs and quarterstaffs and crowbars. He could make out dresses of every color and shape, from pretty and short to voluptuous like a Victorian princess. All the colors boggled his mind. He didn't even know how to begin processing what he saw. "You are unique, August Cerulean," said the soldierly girl who led them down the wide tunnel. "You are the first male to lay eye on our secret base in 14 years. August made a face involuntarily. His facial muscles just responded without him thinking. Elise laughed out loud, and Penny chuckled. "You should see yourself," Elise thought, her voice crackling with humor. "In fact, I'll show you." She cracked a devilish smile. August received an image, from Elise's vantage. It was of him, and he couldn't help but be amazed. His eyes had opened so wide, they seemed to cover a quarter of his face. His jaw hung agape. August quickly closed it, but couldn't help but look stupefied. Penny took August's hand, as much to steady him as it was to keep her feeling well in all the newness of the crowd. Soon, they reached a small, unassuming door just off the main tunnel. The soldierly girl knocked once on the door, and waited. A magical ball lit up and a voice emanated from it, soft and sweet and steely as an iron foundry. "This is General Emerald Eustache's office. I am out or occupied at the moment. Please try again during my open hours." The ball disappeared. The straight-backed girl tapped on the door again, 3 times, and then another 3 times, as if it were all a part of the routine. A voice came from inside, this time. "Come in," it said. The girl opened the door, and ushered the 3 adventurers in. Inside, Ruby, Denise, and Jocelyn stood in front of a desk. There, behind the desk, sat the Supreme Commander of the Disciplinary Force, Emerald Eustache,